Greetings from the far side of the galaxy. I'm Fuuri, your host with the most, here to tell you a story about titties. And I'm only talking about these titties because Israfil literally doesn't have enough to make a video on as of yet. You see, Housamo is going through a bit of a popularity surge with the new banner. And like any self-respecting YouTuber, I am riding that wave of popularity like the trend chaser I am. Oh, before we begin, we have to break out the party poppers. That's a reference to my Shalat video. Go ahead and give it a watch to understand the joke. The reason for this sudden celebration is that we've reached a new milestone. We managed to reach 400 subscribers, which is incredible, and to light a fire under your bellies, I'll promise you this. At 500 subscribers, I'll make a Housamo Heroes video about Shenong, and at 1000, I'll do one over all the Hakinshi. Or the Exiles, one of the two. Got that? With one final thank you for all your support, let's get back to today's Housamo Hero. I put off some other projects to make this work, like my knife-only Elden Ring run, which is going... It's going, let's just leave it at that. Also, I do these Housamo Heroes video by request, so do leave whichever Housamo Hero you want next in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and now that we have this intro completely rushed and out of the way, let's get this video started. Today's Housamo Hero is the burning brand bearing a boulder of a burden, Zabaniyya. Here's your spoiler warnings for the chapters 4, 8, 13 Prelude, Kinda, and the Seaside Fashionista event. Zabaniyya is an angel transient from the world of Eden, the world based on Abrahamic mythology. Although he calls Gehenna, the world based on the Abrahamic hell, his home. You see, he has the role of the torturer and the rule of hellfire. He was the one whose job it was to punish sinners in Gehenna. His artifact's well suited to his role since it's an immaterial fire that burns on some sort of immaterial level. He can burn people without harming their skin, seemingly creating an everlasting pain. Think of it as the fire version of Horkyu Kamui's artifact. Just as Horkyu can cool down the flames of passion, Zabaniyya can stoke them as revealed in the Halloween event. He belongs to the Aoyama missionaries, and his sheer skill with such a powerful artifact gave him the title of the missionary's strongest member. For the first time in this series, we have a teacher, since Zabaniyya teaches at Taikanyama Academy, which the missionaries are based at. Oh, and just for the record, Zabaniyya actually wears glasses, although he's rarely seen wearing them. As the name might suggest, Zabaniyya is inspired by the Zabaniyya from Abrahamic literature. While Zabaniyya are mostly associated with Islam, the concept of angels of punishment originate as far back as the Tanakh. The Tanakh is a collection of Jewish scripture, including the Torah and other books. They're not explicitly named, but they are referenced in Exodus as angels of punishment. Although their role of torturers comes from the Apocalypse of Paul, a piece of Apocrypha where they use hooks and remain unnamed. It's theorized by some that Zabaniyya were originally a kind of Arabic demon that were later fitted into Islamic thought. Zabaniyya, as we know them today, came about when Islamic scholars whose names I won't even try to pronounce brought them into Islamic literature. They became viewed as angels of death who appeared as shadows, dragging down sinful souls. The Zabaniyya also played a role in guarding the Prophet Muhammad while he prayed in the Kaaba, protecting him from Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl completely freaked when he saw one, and it makes sense considering the Zabaniyya were supposed to be monstrous. They were more like classical angels, flames leaping out of their mouths, eyes flashing like lightning, and teeth like cow horns. Depending on your taste, you might be glad Lifehunters decided to ignore all that when designing Zabaniyya. You know, if you're a coward. Although, if you keep this between you and me, Lifehunters made him look like a cringy youth pastor, which I suppose he is. Aside from his design, Lifehunters did seem to interpret Zabaniyya pretty well if you ask me. They kept the idea of him being a torturer and the association with fire. I suppose they even keep the idea of him being a sort of discouraging guardian, with him being the Aoyama Guild's strongest member. Just as they scared off Abu Jahl, Zabaniyya's presence alone was enough to ward off other guilds like the Tycoons. Another thing to note is that in the literature, Zabaniyya worked alongside Azazel, just as Zabaniyya does in-game. And his artifact's name, Longinus, is a reference to the Roman soldier Longinus, or more specifically, his spear. It's said that Longinus was the one who pierced Jesus' side, finally killing him. The act is said to have given the lance many mystical properties, and many claim to have it, but I can't say if any of them are right. Since I'm done with Zabaniyya's inspirations, I suppose that means we move on to his backstory. Seeing as how he was the main feature of Chapter 4, we actually get a lot of info on his past. He was there to bear witness to Satan's rebellion, and while he did not aid, he was infatuated with the act. You see, just as sinners were confined to Gehenna, so was Zabaniyya confined to a role he began to doubt. His act of torturing sinners was in fact the sin itself, so he began to lust for punishment. There's a joke I can make here, but YouTube's safe for work content policy won't let me make it. As those doubts infested him, he was eventually pulled away from Gehenna and pulled into Tokyo. Here in Tokyo, he began to teach at Daikanyama Academy and joined the Aoyama missionaries, establishing himself as its main defender. It is then that we meet him in the main quest. We first meet him in Chapter 3 as he stops a fight between Kengo and some angels. Kengo ends up challenging Zabaniyya to a duel, but he gets mad when he won't fight him in earnest. Zabaniyya explains he only uses his full power against sinners, giving Kengo a bad idea Shiro manages to put away. Let's see, we next see him torture a ninja for information after he attacked Maria and the player, blah blah blah. Oh, we next see him confront Maria about not being Maria, but Kengo manages to hold him off. We get a huge chunk of Zabaniyya's backstory as he's about to finish off Kengo. Arslan stops him and, wow, Life Hunters really isn't the subtle bunch, are they? Jeez. Arslan's reappearance doesn't really help much as Ryota causes an exception when his artifact collides with Zabaniyya's. When the Holy Grail that can heal all wounds clashes with the flames that cause everlasting pain, Zabaniyya is forced into a berserk state. Nalantotep teleports Zabaniyya to the chapel where he goes on a rampage until the player arrives. Slish slash, bang bosh, fight happens, player wins, and Zabaniyya fades away having answered the question burning inside him. He next shows up in Chapter 8, turning the exception Calamity alongside the others who faded away. He helps the player fight their way to Fisher King before being dismissed alongside the other exceptions. In the Chapter 13 prologue, it's revealed that Israfil managed to be summoned to Tokyo using Zabaniyya as a sort of medium. I don't really understand how it's supposed to have happened, and the fact that it's untranslated doesn't make my understanding any better. And speaking of untranslated stuff, Zabaniyya is actually one of the main characters in the Seaside Fashionista event. I'll get into his role in the events when we get into his units, and would you look at the time, that's right now. To begin, Life Hunters totally doesn't play favorites considering this youth bastard gets a 3-star, a 5-star, and another 5-star. We'll start with his normal units before we go into the limited one from the Fashionista event. They're both fire thrust type units and they aren't actually the same. His 5-star even has a skill evolution. Once again, I'd like to remind you that Life Hunters totally doesn't play favorites. His 3-star's first skill applies Stigma to hit units, capping out at 70%, which is good enough, I suppose, but it would be better at 100. Next, he applies Blessing 1 square around himself after moving at 50%, which is good for a wide-range healing skill. He then gets an attack modifier for Stigma, and that is the only reason it makes his first skill's 70% proc acceptable. And finally, he gets another attack modifier for Burn, both the normal and the stackable kind. Already, this man's 3-star is better than most 4-stars, and would you believe me if I said it's only upwards from here? The 5-star has all of the same stuff with Stigma, Blessing, and the attack modifier, but it changes with that last skill. Rather than just the burn modifier, he gets an attack up at 30% just in case his damage wasn't already high enough. And the 5-star gets a skill evolution which affects his first skill. It boosts his Stigma chances to 90%, which is so much win. Oof, wow, that meme was dated even by my standards. It then gives him Prayer when appearing just for that extra 10% proc to all of his skills. He then gets extra CP when being hit and even more extra CP when being debuffed. I swear, if YouTube's content policy didn't tie me down, I'd be making so many BDSM jokes right now. I'll speak more about his units later, but I will say this. Wowzers, this dude's units are some of the best DPS in the game. His next unit is another 5-star that comes from the Seaside Fashionista event. The basic story of the event is that Arachne takes a challenge from Yumao to make outfits for certain characters. Despite the unit's default art, she first makes him a suit to officiate wedding ceremonies. The unit's default look is actually a swimsuit made for the event's climax. On the end table, you can see photos of Gabriel and Maria and the shot of him and Arslan. There's also this really cool painting of Satan falling into Gehenna. Oh, and also a butt shot of his Halloween costume, like specifically a butt shot. It's a bow-type Valiant unit, and would you be surprised if I said it's one of the best in the game? At phase start, he gives Archer to allies adjacent to him at 80% and attracts enemies in shot range at 100%. It's honestly not a bad skill in the slightest, every bit of it is pretty useful even in the worst case scenario. His next skill gives him a 50% chance of getting tenacity before being hit, which is kind of funny to think about. He applies stigma to enemies that hit him at 100% and is immune to oppression. Thirdly, he gets attack up at 40%, a slight CP boost at 90%, and a 50% chance to apply blessing to himself and adjacent allies when attacking. A pretty good set of skills, but I'm not sure how much I like the proc rate. Lastly, he has increased vertical movement, which is the worst movement bonus, but still a movement bonus. And then at 100%, he applies protection to himself and adjacent allies while also giving those allies a bit of bonus CP. All in all, Fashionista Zaba... He has a skill evolution? Why? His kit's not even that bad. Okay. His skill evolution affects his third skill, buffing the attack up and blessing to 70% proc, and... after moving, apply a debuff that removes 50 CP, 20,000 HP to units that hit Zabaniyya 90% of the time? I genuinely don't know whose dick Zabaniyya had to suck to be treated this well, but oh my god. For a decent chunk of Husamo's lifespan, Zabaniyya's normal 5-star was probably the best unit in this entire game. His 5-star is still good for what it's worth, alongside his Fashionista unit being amazing too. If Hakumen's units were a 5, then all of Zabaniyya's units are a 20. I actually managed to collect a complete set of Zabaniyya, eat your heart out, so I speak from experience with these team recommendations. His 3 and 5-star worked pretty well on my Stigma team with Onsen Mineaki and Jiangxi Krampus. His Fashionista doesn't need a specific team, but anything that can keep his HP topped off for that busted skill evo is good. Arsalan and Surtur are 2 units that come to mind. Since we're done with his units, it's about time we round out this video with Zabaniyya's relationship chart. Kim and Kamui like Zabaniyya since they both strive for self-betterment and they both struggle with the morality of their roles. Batham dislikes him because Zabaniyya is a prudish youth pastor. On the flip side, Zabaniyya himself likes Arsalan because he respects his leadership and his easygoing nature. Zabaniyya dislikes Narlanthotep because he's less of a person and more of a walking, talking personality defect. And speaking of Zabaniyya's relationship with a guy, they do share a loading screen. It shows Zabaniyya grinding his teeth as he's hounded by Narlanthoteps. It reads he's so annoying. And I may simp for Narlanthotep, but yeah, I have to agree with that. Life Under's loves all its transients equally is something I would say if I was a liar. Horikyu Kamui may be Husamo's poster boy, but Zabaniyya is the boy. He's a major part of the main quest, he's got some of the best unit, and his variant is from the most profitable banner. Dude even got a statue. A statue! Do I even need to give Zabaniyya my seal of approval? Clearly Life Under's already gave him theirs. Thanks for watching, do be sure to like, subscribe, and comment whichever transient you want next. Do be sure to check out my Housamo Heroes playlist if you want more. And remember, once we reach 500 subscribers, I'll do a video about Shenong. And once we reach 1000, I'll do a video about all the Hakenshi or the Exiles. With nothing more to say other than a big old thank you, this is your host Fuuri, signing out.